The cart tipped just as the mud reached its axle, and Petra Brennock watched her entire autumn harvest start to vanish into the peat bog like a bad dream made flesh and vegetable. She had been leading her old mule along the winding track that skirted the western edge of the Harrow Flats when the brake gave way with a sound like a dry bone snapping. The cart lurched backward down the slight grade, pulling free of the mule's traces, and by the time Petra had spun around it was already wheels deep in the sucking black water. Turnips, beets, 3 sacks of barley, late squash, her good wooden crates, all of it tilting, sliding, beginning the slow swallow into water that had no bottom anyone had ever found. She threw herself after it, boots squelching in the margin grass, but the moment her weight hit the real bog she sank to her knees and knew with cold certainty that if she kept going she would lose herself along with everything she owned. The cart was 5 yards out already, settling deeper with each second, and Petra could only stand there with mud gripping her legs and her heart hammering against her ribs while the year's entire income disappeared. She was still standing there, frozen between panic and despair, when the man came wading past her. He did not ask permission or shout a question. He simply walked into the bog as though it were a spring creek, long legs driving through the muck, arms out for balance. Petra saw him in flashes through the mist that clung to the flats. Tall, lean, dark hair plastered to his skull by the drizzle, wearing a surveyor's canvas coat already soaked through. He reached the cart just as the first crate tipped free, caught it one-handed, shoved it back, then got both hands under the cart's bed and heaved. Nothing happened. The bog held. The man shifted his stance, sank to mid-thigh and heaved again. Petra watched the muscles in his shoulders bunch under the wet canvas, watched him brace and pull, and then with a great squelching roar the cart lurched a foot forward. "Get the mule," he shouted, voice strained but steady. "Tie on and pull." Petra moved. She slogged back out of the margin muck, grabbed the mule's lead, and coaxed the animal around until she could loop the traces back through the cart's iron rings. The mule planted its feet and leaned. The man pushed. Petra waded back in, got her hands on the cart's side and pulled with everything she had. The bog fought them. It held and sucked and pulled, and for long minutes Petra thought they would lose anyway. Her arms burned, her legs shook, and the man was making sounds of effort that should have been alarming. But then the cart gave another lurch, then another, and suddenly it was moving steadily, dragging free of the deep water and back onto the firmer margin where grass grew in tussocks, and the ground only squelched instead of swallowing. They hauled it 20 yards from the bog's edge before the man let go and stood there, chest heaving, dripping from head to foot. He was coated in black peat mud. It covered his coat, his trousers, his hands, streaked his face and clumped in his hair. He looked like something that had crawled out of the earth's beginning. Petra stared at him. Her heart was still racing, but not from effort anymore. He had waded into a killing bog without hesitation, for a stranger's cart, and now he stood there breathing hard and wiping mud from his eyes with the back of one filthy hand, and something in Petra's chest turned over hard. "Mud looks rather good on a husband," she said. The words were out before she could stop them. The man blinked at her, then started to laugh, a startled, breathless sound. Petra felt her face go hot. Her green skin probably hid the blush, but her tusks always showed when she pressed her lips together in embarrassment. "I did not mean," she started. "I am covered in bog," the man said, still laughing. "I smell like dead plants and sulfur. I am a stranger, and you think I look good. You saved my harvest," Petra said. The words came out sharper than she meant. "You did not even ask. You just," she gestured at the bog, at the cart, at him. "Who does that?" The laughter faded from his face, leaving something gentler. "Someone who sees another person in trouble," he said simply. They stood looking at each other across the few feet of muddy grass. The drizzle pattered on the cart's canvas cover. The mule shook its harness and snorted. "I am Petra Brennock," Petra said finally. "I farm the holding a mile east of here, and I owe you more than I can say." "Vincent Irewood," the man said. He made a motion as if to offer his hand, looked down at the mud coating it, and dropped it again with a rueful smile. "Surveyor, I was cutting the boundary line for the Grendel estate when I heard the crash. You left your work to pull a stranger's cart out of a bog." "The boundary will keep," Vincent said. "Your turnips would not have." Petra felt that strange turning sensation again, somewhere under her breastbone. She had been a widow for 2 years. Her husband had been a good man, steady and kind, and his death from a winter fever had left her alone on a hardscrabble holding with debts and no clear way forward. In those 2 years, she had learned to be wary of men who offered help, because help usually came with expectations she had no interest in meeting. But this man had not offered. He had simply acted. And he was not looking at her with anything but open friendliness, as if pulling carts from bogs was something he did every 3rd day and required no special gratitude. "Let me at least give you a meal," Petra said, "and a place to wash. You cannot go back to surveying like that." Vincent looked down at himself and smiled. "I would frighten the chain man," he admitted. "If you are certain—" "I am certain," Petra said. She was. She wanted him in her home at her table where she could look at him in decent light and figure out why her pulse had not yet settled. They loaded the canvas back over the cart's contents, checked that nothing had been lost in the bog, and started the slow walk back to Petra's holding. Vincent walked beside the cart, still dripping. Petra led the mule and tried not to stare. He was not beautiful exactly. His face was too lean for that. All angles and strong bones, with a nose that had been broken at least once, and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily. But there was something about the way he moved, long-limbed and easy, and the way he looked at the landscape around them, alert, interested, taking in every detail. "How long have you farmed here?" he asked as they walked. "All my life," Petra said. "My parents cleared this holding. I inherited it when they died, worked it with my husband, and now I work it alone. That must be hard. It is what it is." Petra kept her voice level. She did not need pity. "The land is good. The bog is a problem, but the peat makes the soil rich. I grow enough to sell at market and keep myself fed." "And yet you drive your cart along a bog track," Vincent said, but there was no judgment in it, only curiosity. "It is the fastest way to the market road," Petra said, "and I have driven it 100 times without trouble. The brake failed today. I should have checked it more carefully." "Equipment fails," Vincent said. "That is not your fault." Petra glanced at him. He was looking at the bog, which stretched away to their left in a rumpled expanse of black water and gray-green moss. Mist lay over it in ragged curtains. "You are not from around here," she said. "No, I travel for work. I survey land, draw maps, set boundaries. I go where the work is." "That must be a restless life." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "It is," he said finally, "but it suits me." There was something in his voice, some edge Petra could not quite name. She let it lie and focused on the track ahead. Her holding appeared as they crested a low rise. A small stone house with a turf roof, a barn, a chicken coop, and 30 acres of fenced fields stretching back toward the tree line. It was not much, but it was hers, and Petra felt the familiar swell of fierce pride as they approached. She directed Vincent to the well and brought him a bucket of clean water and a rag. He stripped off his coat and began scrubbing mud from his hands and face, while Petra unhitched the mule and led it into the barn. When she came back out, Vincent had cleaned most of the mud from his skin and was trying to wring out his coat. "Leave it," Petra said. "I will hang it by the fire to dry. Come inside." The house was small. One main room with a hearth, a table, 2 chairs, and a narrow ladder leading up to a sleeping loft. Petra kept it clean and spare. She had sold most of the furniture after her husband died, keeping only what she needed. Vincent stood just inside the door, dripping onto the swept floor, and looked around with the same quiet attention he had given the landscape. "You keep a good home," he said. "I try." Petra hung his coat on a peg near the fire and gestured to one of the chairs. "Sit. I will make tea and find you something dry to wear while your clothes dry out." She climbed to the loft and rummaged through the chest where she kept her late husband's clothes. Most of them she had traded away, but she still had a couple of shirts and a pair of trousers. She brought them down and handed them to Vincent, then turned her back while he changed. When she turned around again, he was dressed in clothes that fit reasonably well, though the trousers were a bit short. He had draped his wet things over the second chair. Petra filled the kettle and hung it over the fire, then sat across from him and tried to think of what to say. "Thank you," she said finally. "Truly. That cart," she stopped, swallowed. "That was my whole autumn crop. Everything I grew this year. If I had lost it, I would have lost the holding." Vincent frowned. "You are that close to the edge," Petra nodded. She did not like admitting it, but there seemed little point in hiding the truth. "My husband left debts when he died. Medical costs mostly. The healer tried everything, but the fever was too strong. I have been paying them down, but there is still a large sum owed to the landholder. It comes due at the end of harvest season. I need every penny from this crop to meet it. And if you cannot pay, I lose the holding. The landholder takes it back." Vincent was quiet. He looked at her with those steady dark eyes, and Petra felt stripped bare under that gaze, as if he could see straight through to the knot of fear and desperation she carried in her chest. "How much do you owe?" he asked. Petra told him. It was a staggering sum for a small holding, enough to make Vincent's eyebrows rise. "That is, I know," Petra said. She stood and busied herself with the tea, pouring hot water into 2 chipped mugs. "But I will make it. I always do." She set a mug in front of him and sat down again. Vincent wrapped his hands around the mug but did not drink. "How many weeks until the debt is due?" he asked. 6. "And you have to get this crop to market, sell it, and hope you get enough." "Yes." Vincent looked toward the door as if he could see through it to the cart standing in the yard. "Some of that crop got wet in the bog. The sacks, the squash. You will lose value there." "I know." Petra forced herself to say it calmly. Panicking would not help. "You need to dry everything out, sort what is damaged, and get the rest to market quickly before it spoils further." "I know," Petra said again. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, then nodded as if he had made a decision. "I will help you," he said. Petra blinked. "What?" "I will help you sort and dry the crop, get it to market, and sell it. You need an extra pair of hands, and you need someone who can negotiate prices. I can do both. You have your surveying work. The boundary line can wait a few days," Vincent said. "The landholder is in no hurry. You are." Petra stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because you need help," Vincent said simply, "and I can give it. But you do not know me. You do not owe me anything." "I know you are in trouble through no fault of your own," Vincent said. "I know you work this land alone and you are trying to keep it. That is enough." Petra felt something crack open inside her chest. She had been alone for so long, had grown so used to doing everything herself, that the simple offer of help felt almost painful. "I cannot pay you," she said. "I am not asking you to." "Then why?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Vincent said. He finally drank his tea, then set the mug down and looked at her with a faint smile. And because a woman who decides mud looks good on a husband is clearly someone worth knowing, Petra felt her face heat again. I should not have said that. I am glad you did, Vincent said. His smile widened, warm and genuine, and Petra felt her traitorous heart skip. She had fallen, she realized. Right there in the bog, watching him wade through killing mud to save her livelihood. She had fallen hard and fast in a way she had not since she was a girl. It was foolish and dangerous, and she should absolutely not let herself feel this way about a man who had just admitted he lived a restless, traveling life and would be gone as soon as his work was done. But her heart did not seem to care about logic. "All right," she said. "I accept, thank you." Vincent nodded. "We should start today, if you have the energy. The sooner we get things sorted, the better." They spent the rest of the afternoon unloading the cart and spreading the crop across the barn floor to dry. The barley sacks had taken the worst of the water. 2 were soaked through, and the grain inside was already starting to swell and spoil. Petra set those aside with a sinking heart. The turnips and beets were mostly sound, though mud caked. The squash had fared better, being at the top of the load. Vincent worked steadily and without complaint, lifting heavy crates and hauling sacks as if he did farm work every day. He asked questions as they worked: how long the barley could dry before it spoiled, what price she usually got at market, whether she had regular buyers, and listened to her answers with the same quiet attention he gave everything. By evening they had everything sorted and spread to dry. Petra made a simple dinner of bread, cheese, and preserved vegetables, and they ate by the fire while Vincent's clothes dried on their pegs. "You said you travel for work," Petra said as they ate. "Do you ever stay anywhere long?" "Not often," Vincent said. "A few weeks, a month at most. Then the work is done and I move on." "Do you have family anywhere?" "A home," Vincent shook his head. "My parents died when I was young. I was raised by an uncle who taught me surveying, and when he died I just kept moving. It seemed easier than settling." "Easier how?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, turning his mug in his hands. "Easier than putting down roots and watching them die," he said finally. "Everything ends. People leave, or they die, or you do. I learned that young, so I do not stay long enough to grow roots." There was old pain in his voice, carefully banked. Petra recognized it because she carried her own. "That sounds lonely," she said. "Sometimes," Vincent admitted, "but it also feels safe." Petra nodded. She understood that, too. After her husband died, she had considered leaving, selling the holding and starting over somewhere no one knew her as half of a pair. But the land had held her, and now she could not imagine being anywhere else. "You ever want to stop moving?" she asked. Vincent looked at her, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes, yearning maybe, or fear. "I do not know if I could," he said. "I have been restless for so long I am not sure I remember how to be still." "You are still right now," Petra pointed out. "Right now is easy," Vincent said. "It is staying that is hard." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire. Petra felt the weight of his words settle around her. He was warning her, she realized, telling her not to expect him to stay. And she should listen, should protect her bruised heart and keep her distance. But when she looked at him, firelight catching in his dark eyes and painting warm shadows across his face, all she could think was that mud had indeed looked good on him, and he looked even better clean. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work. They sorted the damaged barley from the sound, spread everything in the sun when it appeared, and turned the root vegetables to keep them from rotting. Vincent proved to have a steady, methodical approach to work that meshed well with Petra's own. They developed an easy rhythm, moving around each other in the barn without needing to speak. In the evenings they sat by the fire and talked. Vincent told her about the places he had been, the strange boundaries he had surveyed a property line that ran straight through a lake, a disputed border between two families that had not spoken in 3 generations. Petra told him about the holding, about her parents and her husband, about the year the bog had flooded and drowned half her crop, and how she had replanted in desperation, and somehow made it work. "You are tougher than you look," Vincent said one evening. "I have to be," Petra said. "No one else is going to save this place." "You saved it yourself," Vincent said. "I just pulled a cart out of a bog." "You did more than that," Petra said quietly. Vincent looked at her, and for a moment the air between them felt charged, thick with things unsaid. Then he looked away and the moment passed. On the 4th day they loaded the cart again and set out for market. It was a long drive, nearly 6 hours, and they left before dawn to make the best use of the light. The market was in a town called Grendel's Cross, a sprawling collection of buildings at the intersection of 2 trade roads. Petra had been selling there for years and knew most of the buyers. She also knew what to expect when she arrived with a man at her side. The stares started as soon as they entered the market square. Petra ignored them, as she always did, and led Vincent to her usual spot near the grain merchants. She set up quickly, laying out her vegetables and opening the good sack of barley for inspection. The first buyer who approached was a grain merchant named Tallies, a round-faced human with shrewd eyes. He looked at Petra, then at Vincent, then back at Petra. "Petra Brennock," he said, "I heard you had trouble at the bog." Word traveled fast in small communities. Petra kept her face neutral. "A broken brake, nothing I could not handle." Tallies looked at Vincent again. "And who is this?" "Vincent Irewood," Vincent said before Petra could answer. "I helped pull the cart out. I am surveying land nearby." "Surveyor, are you?" Tallies looked him up and down. "Funny, I have never seen a surveyor who smells like turnips." "I am versatile," Vincent said mildly. Tallies grunted and turned his attention to the barley. He took a handful, examined it, sniffed it, rolled a few grains between his fingers. "This got wet," he said. "Some did," Petra said. "I sorted out the damaged grain. What you see here is sound." Tallies tossed the grain back and dusted his hands. "I will give you half your usual price." "Half?" Petra kept her voice level even as her stomach dropped. "The grain is good. It is worth full price." "Maybe before it went into a bog," Tallies said. "Now it is a risk, half price or nothing." Petra opened her mouth to argue, but Vincent stepped forward. "The grain is sound," he said. His voice was still mild, but there was steel underneath. "You just examined it yourself. It is dry, undamaged, and worth full price. If you do not want to pay a fair rate, we will take it elsewhere." Tallies bristled. "Who are you to tell me my business?" "Someone who knows a bad deal when he sees one," Vincent said. "And someone who knows Petra Brennock has been selling good grain here for years. You trying to undercut her because she had one piece of bad luck tells me you are not a man of honor." The words hung in the air. Around them, other vendors and buyers had stopped to watch. Tallies' face went red. "Are you calling me a cheat?" "I am calling you opportunistic," Vincent said. "There is a difference, but not much of one." For a moment Petra thought Tallies would strike him, but then another voice cut in. "The surveyor is right." It was an older woman, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, who ran a vegetable stall 2 spaces down. Her name was Marna, and she was one of the few people at market who had always treated Petra fairly. "Petra's grain is always good," Marna said loudly. "If you do not want it, Tallies, I know 3 others who will pay full price." Tallies looked around at the watching crowd, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he spat on the ground and turned back to Petra. "Full price," he muttered, "but I am only taking 1 sack." "That is acceptable," Petra said, keeping her relief off her face. The transaction was completed quickly. Tallies paid, took his sack, and left without another word. As soon as he was gone, Petra turned to Vincent. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did," Vincent said. "He was trying to rob you. He has tried before. I am used to it. You should not have to be." Petra looked at him, at the set of his shoulders and the determined line of his mouth, and felt that turning sensation again, stronger this time. He had stood up for her in front of a crowd, had risked offending a buyer she might need in the future, because it was the right thing to do. "Thank you," she said quietly. Vincent's expression softened. "You are welcome." They sold the rest of the crop over the next 2 hours. Marna bought most of the turnips, and several other buyers took the beets and squash. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the cart was nearly empty, and Petra had a pouch of coins that felt heavier than she had dared hope. She and Vincent found a quiet corner of the market and counted the money. It was not enough. Even with Vincent's help negotiating, even with fair prices, the damaged barley had cost her too much. She was still 30 silver short of what she needed to pay the debt. Petra stared at the coins spread on the cart bed and felt despair well up. She had been so close. But close was not enough. "We have time," Vincent said. 6 weeks, you said. We can grow more or find another way to make up the difference." "There is nothing left to grow," Petra said. Her voice sounded flat even to her own ears. "The season is too late, and I have nothing else to sell." "Then we find work. I can take on more surveying jobs, give you the pay. I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking. I am offering." Petra looked at him. He meant it. She could see that. He was prepared to work himself ragged to help her meet a debt he had no part in. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing all this?" Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and covered her hand with his, warm and solid. "Because I want to," he said simply. Petra felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. I cannot promise you anything." "I am not asking for promises." "Then what do you want?" Vincent smiled, small and sad. "I do not know yet," he said. "Maybe I just want to help. Maybe I want to see you keep your land. Maybe," he stopped, shook his head. "Maybe I just want to stay a little longer." Petra turned her hand over and gripped his fingers. "I would like that," she said. They drove back to the holding in silence, but it was a companionable silence, the kind that felt easy rather than strained. When they arrived, they unloaded the empty cart, and Petra put the money away in the locked box under her bed. Then they made dinner together, moving around the small kitchen in the same easy rhythm they had developed over the past days. After dinner, Vincent went outside to check on the mule, and Petra stood at the window, watching him move through the yard in the fading light. He had been with her less than a week, but already it felt like he belonged here. Already she could imagine him staying, working the land beside her, sitting across from her at meals. Already she could imagine waking up next to him. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it settled into her chest like warmth, like hope. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. Vincent returned to his surveying work during the days, but he came back to the holding each evening and stayed the night, sleeping on a pallet by the fire. He helped with chores in the mornings and evenings, mending fences and reinforcing the barn roof, and doing a dozen other small tasks that Petra had been putting off for months. They talked more. Vincent told her about his uncle, a gruff man who had taught him to read land and draw maps but had never shown much affection. Petra told him about her husband, about the quiet love they had shared and the hollow ache his death had left. "You still miss him?" Vincent asked one evening. "Every day," Petra said honestly. "But not the way I did at first. It is more he is part of the landscape now, part of the land. I feel him here in the fields and the house, but it does not hurt the way it used to." "You think you could love someone else?" Petra looked at him. The question hung between them, weighted with all the things they had not said. "I think I could," she said carefully, "if it was the right person." Vincent nodded slowly. He did not ask if she thought he might be that person, and Petra did not offer. It felt too soon, too fragile to put into words, but she thought about it. Late at night, lying in her loft bed, she thought about what it would be like to tell him she had fallen in love with him, to ask him to stay. And every time she imagined it, she also imagined him leaving, because that was what he did. He had told her himself. He did not know how to be still. 3 weeks after the bog, the landholder's agent came to the holding. Petra saw him coming from a distance, a thin man on a gray horse, riding up the track in mid-afternoon. She had been working in the garden, pulling the last of the late carrots, and she stood with dirt on her hands and dread in her stomach as he dismounted. "Petra Brennock," he said. He had a reedy voice and cold eyes. "I am here on behalf of Lord Grendel." "I know who you are, Carr," Petra said. "The debt is not due for 3 more weeks." "I am aware," Carr said. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and held it out. "This is a reminder and a warning. Lord Grendel expects payment in full by the end of harvest season. If you cannot pay, the holding reverts to his ownership." "I am aware of the terms," Petra said tightly. "Are you?" Carr looked around the holding with barely concealed disdain. "Because from where I stand, it does not look like you have the means to make good on a debt that size." "I will have the money." "Will you?" Carr smiled, thin and unpleasant. "I have heard about your trouble at the bog. I have heard you lost half your crop." "It seems to me you are going to come up short, Petra Brennock, and when you do, this land will finally be put to better use." "Better use?" Petra felt anger flare hot in her chest. "I have worked this land my whole life. I have made it productive. What better use could there be?" "Use by someone human," Carr said, and there it was, the ugly truth laid bare. "Lord Grendel has been patient letting you stay on after your husband died, but patience has limits. This is good land and it should be worked by good people." "Get off my property," Petra said. Her voice shook with fury. "I will go," Carr said. He swung back onto his horse, then looked down at her. 3 weeks, Petra. If you do not have the money, be prepared to leave." He rode away, and Petra stood there shaking with rage and fear until she heard footsteps behind her. "How much of that did you hear?" she asked. "Enough," Vincent said. His voice was tight. "He is wrong, Petra. The land is yours. You have paid for it in blood and sweat." "But not in coin," Petra said bitterly. "And that is all that matters to men like Carr." Vincent stepped up beside her, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. "We will find the money." "How? I have sold everything I can sell. There are no more crops coming. I cannot." Petra stopped, swallowed hard. "I am going to lose the holding." "No." Vincent turned to face her, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders. "No, we will find a way." "There is no way," Petra said. Despair was crushing her, heavy and cold. "I am 30 silver short and there is nowhere to get it." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What if you had a partner?" Petra blinked. "What, a partner?" "Someone to buy into the holding with you. If you had co-ownership, the debt would be split. You would only owe half." "I do not have anyone who could." Petra stopped, stared at him. "You, me," Vincent said. "I have money saved. Surveying pays well and I have few expenses. If I bought a half share of the holding, I could cover the rest of the debt." Petra felt her heart start to race. "You would do that?" "Yes." "But that would mean staying. You would have to stay here, work the land." "You said you do not know how to be still." "Maybe it is time I learned," Vincent said. His hands were still on her shoulders, warm and solid. "Maybe I have been running for so long I forgot there might be something worth staying for." "Vincent, I know it is fast," he said. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks. But Petra, he stopped, took a breath. "I think I could build a life here, with you, if you would have me." Petra stared at him. Her heart felt too big for her chest, hope and fear tangled together so tightly she could not separate them. You do not have to decide right now, Vincent said quickly. Think about it, but the offer is real. I want to help. I want to stay. Why? Petra asked. She needed to hear him say it. Vincent smiled, small and crooked. Because mud looked good on a husband, remember, and you, his voice softened. You look good on a home. You belong here, Petra. This land is yours, and I would like to be part of it. Part of you. Petra felt tears spill over. She had not cried when her husband died, had held herself together through the grief and the debt and the endless grinding work. But now, standing in her garden with this man who had waded into a killing bog for her and was now offering to give up his wandering life to save her home, she could not hold it back. Yes, she said. Yes, please stay. Vincent pulled her into his arms and Petra buried her face in his shoulder and let herself cry. He held her, steady and warm, and when the tears finally stopped, she pulled back and looked up at him. Are you certain? She asked. This is a hard life. The work never stops. The bog will always be a danger, and people will talk. They will say things. Let them talk, Vincent said. I have spent my whole life moving past people's opinions. I am not about to start caring now. I am Orc, Petra said. She needed to make sure he understood. That will never change. People like Carr will always see me as less, as other. If you stay with me, they will see you the same way. Then I will be in good company, Vincent said. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the last of her tears. I do not care what they think, Petra. I care about you. I care about this place. That is enough. Petra looked into his eyes and saw only truth. He meant it. Every word. I love you, she said. The words came out fierce and sure. I fell in love with you in the bog, and every day since has only made it stronger. I love you, Vincent Irewood, and I want you to stay. Vincent's face lit up, brighter than she had ever seen it. I love you too, he said. I think I have since the moment you told me I looked good covered in mud. Petra laughed, shaky and raw, and then Vincent was kissing her and she was kissing him back. Fierce and desperate and full of all the hope she had been too afraid to feel. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. We should make it legal, he said. The partnership, I mean, draw up proper papers, make it official with the landholder. Agreed, Petra said, then feeling bold. And after that, Vincent said, smiling, maybe we should make the other part official too. Petra felt her breath catch. Are you asking? Not yet, Vincent said. But soon, if you would consider it. I would, Petra said. I will. Yes. They went to see Lord Grendel's estate agent the next day, a different man than Carr, older and more reasonable. Vincent laid out his proposal. He would buy a half share in the Brennock holding, pay off the outstanding debt, and become co-owner with Petra. The agent drew up the papers, they signed, and Vincent transferred the money from his savings. When it was done, Petra felt as if she could breathe fully for the first time in 2 years. The holding was secure. She was not alone. They celebrated that evening with a simple meal and a bottle of wine Petra had been saving for an occasion that felt worthy. They sat by the fire, close enough that their shoulders touched, and talked about the future. We should replant the bog field, Vincent said. It gets good sun, and if we can keep the drainage clear, it would be excellent for late vegetables. And we need to replace the barn roof before winter, Petra added. It has been patched too many times. We could expand the chicken coop, sell eggs at market, and maybe plant an orchard. The south field would be perfect for apple trees. They spun plans into the firelight, easy and excited, and Petra felt a happiness she had almost forgotten was possible. This was what partnership felt like. Not just romance, but true partnership, two people building something together. I want to marry you, Vincent said suddenly. Not someday. Soon, as soon as you are ready. Petra turned to look at him. His face was serious, intent. "I am ready now," she said. Vincent blinked. Now, tomorrow, whenever we can arrange it." Petra took his hand, laced their fingers together. "I have already wasted too much time being afraid. I do not want to waste any more." Vincent kissed her, slow and sweet, and when he pulled back his eyes were bright. "Then we will do it soon," he said. "We will marry and make this official in every way possible." They set the date for 3 weeks hence, enough time to post the banns and arrange a simple ceremony. Petra sent word to the few friends she had in the area, and Vincent wrote to his former employer to officially end his surveying contract. The news spread quickly. Some people were supportive. Marna sent a warm letter of congratulation, and several of Petra's neighbors stopped by with gifts of food and well wishes. But there were others who made their disapproval clear. Petra saw the stares when she went to market, heard the whispers that cut off when she approached. Carr showed up one afternoon, ostensibly to confirm the debt had been paid but clearly fishing for information. "So it is true," he said, looking between Petra and Vincent with distaste. "You have taken a human husband." "I have taken a partner," Petra said evenly. "And soon, yes, a husband. Lord Grendel will not like this." "Lord Grendel has his money," Vincent said. "What we do with our holding is our business," Carr sneered. "You think you have won something here, do you? You think this will last? An orc and a human playing at farming together. It is unnatural." "What is unnatural," Vincent said, his voice dropping to something hard and cold, "is a man who takes pleasure in other people's suffering. You wanted Petra to fail. You wanted her to lose this land so you could give it to someone you deemed more worthy. But she did not fail. She succeeded. We succeeded. And if that bothers you, I suggest you take it up with someone who cares." Carr's face flushed with anger. For a moment Petra thought he would say something else, but then he turned on his heel and left without another word. Petra let out a shaky breath. That was dangerous. He could cause trouble. "Let him try," Vincent said. "We have done nothing wrong. The holding is legally ours, the debt is paid, and we have every right to marry. Some people will never accept it." "Then they do not matter," Vincent said. He took her hands, his grip warm and steady. "The only people who matter are us, and we are in this together." Petra leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty. He was right. They had done nothing wrong. They deserved their happiness. The wedding was held on a cool autumn morning on the edge of the reclaimed bog field where Vincent had first waded in to save her cart. It seemed fitting, somehow, to marry in the place where everything had started. Marna officiated, using her authority as a village elder. A handful of neighbors attended, along with the surveyor's assistant Vincent had worked with, and a few people from town who had known Petra's parents. It was a small gathering, but it felt right. Petra wore a simple dress of green wool that brought out the color of her skin, and she had woven late-season flowers into her dark hair. Vincent wore his surveying coat, cleaned and mended, and he could not stop smiling. They stood facing each other in the morning light, the bog stretching out behind them and the holding rising solid and sure on the hill. Marna spoke the traditional words, asking them to pledge their commitment, their partnership, their love. "Do you, Vincent Irewood, take this woman as your wife to work beside her, to build a life with her, to stay with her in all seasons?" "I do," Vincent said. His voice was steady and sure. "I will stay." "And do you, Petra Brennock, take this man as your husband to work beside him, to build a life with him, to trust him with your heart and your home?" "I do," Petra said. Her own voice did not shake. "I will trust him." "Then, by the authority granted me, I pronounce you married," Marna said. "May your life together be long and fruitful." Vincent kissed her there in the morning light, with the bog at their backs and the holding before them, and Petra felt complete in a way she had not since her first husband died. This was different, though. This was a partnership forged in crisis and sealed in choice. They had both chosen this, both chosen each other, and that made it precious. The gathering celebrated with a simple meal spread on tables dragged out into the yard. There was bread and cheese, roasted vegetables from the garden, and a cake that Marna had baked. People ate and talked and toasted the new couple, and for a little while the holding felt full of life and warmth. As the sun climbed higher, people began to drift away until finally it was just Petra and Vincent standing in the yard, muddy-booted and grinning at each other. "We are married," Petra said, as if testing the words. "We are," Vincent agreed. "How does it feel, right?" Petra said. "Terrifying and wonderful and absolutely right." Vincent laughed and pulled her close. "Come on, wife, we have work to do." And they did. The holding did not stop needing them just because they had married. But now they worked together, partners in truth as well as law, and that made even the hard tasks feel lighter. The autumn deepened into winter. They replanted the bog field with late root vegetables that would overwinter and provide an early spring crop. They replaced the barn roof, working side by side in the cold wind, and expanded the chicken coop as planned. Vincent proved to have a knack for carpentry, and he built new shelves for the house and a better gate for the garden. In the evenings they sat by the fire, planning the next season. Vincent drew maps of the holding, marking where they might plant an orchard, where they could dig a new well, how they might channel the bog water for irrigation instead of fighting it. Petra added her knowledge of the land, the patterns of weather and soil, and together they crafted a vision of what the holding could become. Winter brought its own challenges. There were storms that tore at the barn roof and froze the well. There were nights when the cold was so bitter, they huddled together under every blanket they owned. But there were also quiet mornings when snow blanketed the fields and turned the world into something clean and new, and evenings when they sat by the fire and talked or simply rested in companionable silence. Vincent proved true to his word. He did not grow restless or talk about moving on. Instead, he settled into the rhythm of the holding as if he had been born to it, learning the quirks of the land and the animals with the same quiet attention he had given his surveying work. And Petra found that loving him was easy. He made her laugh with dry observations about the chickens' personalities. He brought her tea in the mornings and kissed her good night. He listened when she talked about her worries and offered solutions instead of empty comfort. He was steady and warm and absolutely hers. By the time spring arrived, Petra was certain of three things. She loved Vincent with her whole heart, the holding was thriving in a way it never had before, and she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited to be sure before telling Vincent. When she finally did, on a mild evening in early spring, he stared at her for a long moment before his face split into the widest smile she had ever seen. "A baby," he said. "A baby," Petra confirmed. "Due in late autumn, I think." Vincent pulled her into his arms, careful and reverent, and held her close. "We are going to have a child," he said, voice full of wonder. "We are," Petra said. She felt wonder too, and fear, and a fierce protective love that already burned in her chest. "Are you ready for that?" "Absolutely not," Vincent said, laughing. "But I cannot wait." They spent the spring preparing. Vincent built a cradle from ash wood, carving it with careful attention, and Petra sewed blankets and tiny clothes. They planted the orchard they had planned, 20 young apple trees that would not bear fruit for years, but that represented their commitment to the future. Neighbors stopped by with advice and gifts. Marna brought a basket of baby things her own children had outgrown. Even some of the people who had been cold before thawed a little, drawn by the universal warmth of an expected child. Summer was hot and long. Petra's belly swelled and she moved more slowly, but she still worked the garden and tended the animals, Vincent hovering anxiously nearby. He took on the heavier tasks without being asked and made sure she rested in the heat of the day. In late summer, a letter arrived from Lord Grendel's estate. Petra opened it with trepidation, but it was not a threat. It was an offer. The estate wanted to buy vegetables from the holding on a regular contract, providing a guaranteed income. It was a good offer, fair and generous, and Petra suspected Marna had put in a word on their behalf. They accepted, and the contract brought a new stability. They were no longer living season to season, hoping each crop would sell. They had security, a future they could plan for. Autumn arrived, and with it the baby. The labor was long and hard, but Marna and 2 other village women attended, and when it was over, Petra held a squalling, healthy baby boy in her arms. Vincent sat beside her, eyes bright with tears, and touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "He is perfect," he said. "He is," Petra agreed. She felt exhausted and exhilarated and more in love than she had thought possible. What should we name him? They had discussed names for weeks, trading suggestions back and forth. Now, looking at the baby, Vincent smiled. "Connor," he said. "It means strong-willed. I think he will need that growing up between 2 worlds." "Connor Irewood," Petra said, testing it. "I like it." Connor was a good baby, easy and content. He had Petra's green skin and Vincent's dark eyes and tiny nubs that might become tusks. He was beautiful. The holding settled into a new rhythm built around the baby. They took turns with night feedings, worked the land in shifts so someone was always with Connor, and fell into bed each night exhausted but happy. When Connor was 3 months old, on a cold winter morning, they stood together at the edge of the bog field and looked out over the holding. The apple trees were bare but healthy, the fields were resting under a light cover of snow, and smoke rose from the chimney of their home. "Do you ever regret it?" Petra asked. "Giving up the wandering life?" Vincent looked at her, surprised. "Never." "Do you regret taking a chance on a mud-covered stranger?" "Never," Petra said. She leaned into him, his arm coming around her shoulders. "I fell in love with you in a bog, Vincent Irewood, and I would do it again." "Good," Vincent said. He kissed the top of her head. "Because you are stuck with me now, for better or worse, through mud and mire, for as long as we both live." "I can think of worse fates," Petra said, smiling. They stood there together, the 3 of them, as the sun rose over the holding and lit the world in gold. Below them, the bog stretched dark and still, the place where everything had started, where a cart had rolled into the mire and a man had waded in without hesitation, where an orc woman had looked at a stranger covered in mud and seen a husband. It had been a good choice, Petra thought. Maybe the best choice she had ever made. And as Vincent tightened his arm around her and Connor gurgled happily in her arms, Petra knew that this holding, this man, this family was exactly where she was meant to be. The years that followed were good ones. The holding prospered. The orchard began to bear fruit, sweet apples that sold well at market. They added more land, buying the adjacent plot when the owner died and his children had no interest in farming. They hired help during harvest season, young people from the village who were glad of the work. Connor grew into a bright, curious child who loved the animals and the land. When he was 4, Petra gave birth to a daughter they named Fiona. She had Vincent's dark hair and Petra's pointed ears, and she was as stubborn as both her parents combined. The family became a fixture in the community. There were still people who whispered, who disapproved, but most had accepted them. Vincent and Petra proved themselves through hard work and integrity, and slowly even the coldest hearts warmed. Vincent never took another surveying job. He was content with the holding, with the steady rhythm of seasons and the satisfaction of working land that was his own. He did occasionally help neighbors with boundary disputes or land measurements, using his old skills, but he always came home at the end of the day. Petra watched him with their children, patient and loving, and felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. This was not the life she had expected. She had thought she would grow old alone, working the holding until she could not work anymore. Instead, she had a partner, a family, a future full of possibility. They had hard years too. There were seasons when the rains failed and the crops suffered. There was the year a late frost killed half the orchard and they had to replant. There was the fever that swept through the village and took 3 families, though it spared the Irewood holding. Through it all they held together, weathering each storm as partners. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they stood again at the edge of the bog field. It looked different now. They had drained and reclaimed more of the margin, and the field was productive farmland, growing carrots and turnips and late cabbage. Only the deep bog remained untouched, dark water and mist, a reminder of where they had started. "I still think about that day," Petra said. "The cart rolling into the bog, you wading in after it." "Best decision I ever made," Vincent said. "Wading into a killing bog, meeting you," Vincent said. He turned to face her, taking both her hands. "You changed my life, Petra. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to stay. I will never regret a single moment." Petra smiled. "Even the moments when Fiona drew on the walls, or when Connor let all the chickens out, even those," Vincent said, laughing. "Especially those." They kissed there in the fading light and then walked hand in hand back to the house where their children waited. Smoke rose from the chimney, welcoming and warm. The orchard rustled in the evening breeze. The land stretched out around them, productive and peaceful. This was home. This was family. This was the life they had built together, one day at a time, one season at a time, rooted deep in the land they both loved. And as they reached the door and heard Connor and Fiona's laughter from inside, Petra thought again of that moment in the bog, when she had looked at a mud-covered stranger and seen her future. She had been right. Mud had looked very good on a husband indeed.